Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 68 of Genn and Millie, where a Gen Xer and a millennial share the strength-based perspective through which they view the world. We are your hosts, Allison and Tess.
Oh my gosh, I am so proud of you, Allie.
Did I get it?
I wasn't reading a line, but I have it memorized, and so we've done it so many times. So yeah, you got it all right. So we've been experiencing some technical difficulties this morning, as I'm sure many of you have experienced in working from home. And so Allie did all of that from memory. So proud of you.
I am a former theater nerd, so in my past performances, instead of just trying to learn one part, I would learn the whole play.
Of course.
So if anybody jumped a line, I could help them with their line. So for the most part, if there's a script involved, and I've repeated the script, which that is, the intro is our script.
Yeah.
My script anyway. You don't need it, but I do. So the intro is a script, and I can see it in my head.
Yeah.
I can feel the rhythm of it in the way that I say it. I also know my lisp bothers me. And so the strength-based perspective through which they view the world is always something I try to say without lispy.
Huh. Okay.
So I think that I really want to lift up your adaptability in the ways that I did take a couple pictures of Tess during her frozen screen that represent what I believe she could add as a meme of the day. Like, Tess is done with internet issues.
I know, and it's so frustrating because I have good internet. I've never had issues with my internet prior to working from home. But I think, like we had mentioned, like sometimes our technology feels like it's running on overdrive. Like you felt your computer physically felt like it was going to like burn up or start a flame the other day because it was so hot. I feel like everything is just running on overdrive because we are constantly on screens. We're constantly connected. And I frankly have been doing a ton more video chats than I ever have been. And that just uses so much more data and so much more connectivity. And so, yeah, it's just kind of a weird time, and I think we're not that, I don't feel like I'm maxing out my internet at all. I guess I should check that, but yeah, apparently my internet just feels like it's being overused. But I also historically have never hardly been home, prior to working from home all the time now.
Well, and I want to spot your adaptability because you roll with it and come back with a pleasant attitude about it. I think we tried 3 attempts on our laptops, and then you just said, hey, I'm going to FaceTime you. It wasn't, should we cancel? Should I, punch a hole in the wall, Andy? What do I need to do here?
Pull an Andy Bernard.
Sometimes I think my low adaptability is so evident to me. It's so obvious to me that change is really hard for a lot of people, but I really have underestimated how much I value routine. So I don't think because my schedule didn't seem routine-y that I saw myself as a routine person. But boy, howdy, I'm routine.
Oh, I could have told you that, Allie, because just even of the way no matter where you're at and no matter what your day looked like, you had your morning ritual, you have like things you need to do in the evening, like the ritual and rhythm has always been really important to you. And so even though the days might not look the same, you start, you end, you have key moments of things that you do during the day that are all important. And that's routine. It doesn't mean you wake up and every day is a cookie cutter replica of the previous day, right? That's where my mornings all kind of look different and, my evenings all kind of look different. And so that's maybe a little bit of where we tend to box strengths in, like that adaptability looks like every day looks different, Well, you can have every day looking different depending on your context, but it's how you navigate those different days, how you behave within those, right? Strengths being our talent themes, our regular patterns of behavior that help define how we best function. And so even though your days look different, you navigate them in a similar way, applying the same pattern that you have in previous days to them.
And my input strategic blend knows, after years of trying to find a rhythm of well-being, I know what works for me. I know my magic. I know what magic I need. in order to feel my best.
Yeah.
So my input strategic blend says, okay, no matter where you are, this is possible. This is also the knowledge that you have of yourself, your self-awareness, knowing what you love, knowing what you need. As you know, and we've talked about this many times, I travel with a flat sheet. Now, is that ridiculous? Maybe. Is that one more thing to pack, one more bag? Maybe. But here's what I know. I sleep better when I'm in my cocoon of my own sheet. I sleep better. I will function better the next day. I will be a better version of me. And I think it's really good for people to know themselves well enough to say, this may seem ridiculous to someone else, but this is what I need.
Yeah.
And so I'm really starting to notice that we've talked about this. The layers are being pulled away. You're really getting firm on your priorities, what's important to you when you're living in this space of home. I'm starting to realize what really matters to me.
Yeah.
And it's shifting some things for me.
Yeah. That's good. And I wanted a strength spot because I think I'm most surprised by this when I look at your full 34. Not surprised, but this is my own bias against this strength. But you have higher discipline. It's 14 for you. You have higher responsibility. And I think those are really strong strengths. And actually, this was a conversation I was going to have with you offline, but why not just have it on Genn and Millie? Because we have these like real honest conversations.
Brazen.
Brazen. There you go. There's my word. But I have been kind of mulling around with this hypothesis based on the domains of talent that if you don't have maybe a split or representation in each of the domains really high, that some of your mid-range strengths have greater almost concentration than other strengths because you're lacking the strengths in those domains in your dominant themes. So the example that I give is in my top 11, I only fall in 2 domains, right? And that, I fall in strategic thinking and relationship building. That doesn't mean that I can't execute and can't influence, and I use my strengths to do that, but I also think it means that my highest influencing and highest executing, even though they fall lower down, might pop up in a little higher concentration because they're going to be the first. If I just need to execute, I'm going to probably drop down a little further to find that executing theme to pull it up, as opposed to something like my input is 10, which I definitely use input a lot. But because I have all these other strategic thinking themes ahead of it, I'm going to think in other ways. And so I've been, reflecting on that a lot. And I was coaching a coworker at Teammates who has really concentrated domains as well, like I do. And so we were kind of talking about how do we dig into 12, 11, 11, 12, 13, 14, because that's where some of the domain first times that you see domain representation in her 34 list. And so I was thinking the same for myself. My first influencing theme is self-assurance, and it's at 13, which isn't considered a part of my dominant where I draw the line, but it pops up as the way I influence if I just need to influence, right? I influence through my strategic thinking and relationship building, but I'm going to also pull on that maybe at a little higher concentration than I might pull on something like relator, which pops up a little higher, but because I have other relationship building strengths, I might build relationships through those other strengths before I'm going to tap into my relator. Does that make sense? Like that's kind of
it totally makes sense. It really does.
I'm like, it's kind of what I've been throwing around a little bit lately.
And I like the word concentrated. I'm going to do what I typically do and completely throw in a random story that has nothing to do with this, but the reason that I like the word
communication.
I'm really into being myself these days. So
best person to be.
I worked really, really hard this week to get my kayak in the lake. Mm-hmm. This lake next to me has no dock. Mm-hmm. And I am not good yet at getting my kayak in and out of a lake without a dock, without any kind of landing. So I bought a cart because it is pretty massive and it's a little bit difficult for me to navigate. And because I've had some issues with my back, I'm like, just use your brain and get a cart. So I got a cart, and it's very similar to like a golf cart. I didn't have to do much to put it together, but I did put it together, and I was massively proud of myself.
Yeah.
Got it strapped together, ready to go. And I keep thinking to myself, how is this not falling apart or falling off? How did I do? I can't believe I did this. It's just some freak moment in the world that I got this right the first time. And then I get to the lakeside, which is a pretty significant hill. And I'm going downhill. And I think just for a second to myself, I wonder if this is really on correctly. As I start down the hill. And guess what? It's not. And there's some serious momentum as you're going with this. I mean, it's a heavy kayak, and now you've got a cart that's it's moving.
Yeah.
So there's a guy fishing near where I want to go, and so I kind of said, "Hey, look out!"
Just a warning,
because I was afraid I was going to lose control of it, and it fell right off. I mean, it started going and then it just fell right off. And he turns and looks at me, and at first he didn't say anything, and I thought, this is great. So I stood there for a while trying to unstrap everything, get everything situated, wanting him to move because he's clearly in the spot that I need to get in. And with the social distancing, you try to give like the nonverbals, like, look at me holding this kayak trying to get on the lake, and you're standing in the one spot. So I did another. So is that probably the best? I think I might need to be where you are right now. And he turns to me and he said, you're right. There are two spots basically that you can get the kayak on here. This one, and then there's another one across the lake. And I said, oh, you know the lake pretty well. And he said, yes, it's a great fishing lake.
Okay.
And Tess, this is not a lake. This is hardly a reservoir. You know, people aren't on boats but there are always people fishing. And I thought that was really interesting. And I said, really? And he said, yes, but you've got to use the right bait. And he used the word concentrated. So I said, what's in the bait? What's the bait? And he said, it's chicken breast, garlic, Kool-Aid, concentrated Kool-Aid.
What?
And
what?
Well, so he may be, there might be a lot of things going on there, but anyway. He's telling me this, and what was nice is he starts telling me this as I'm trying to navigate the kayak because I don't want him to just stare at me not knowing what I'm doing. And he said, he used the word concentrated, and he said, do you need help? And I said, no, I don't. I do not.
Yeah.
I said, I really feel confident that I can do this. I said, however, if there's a disaster, you know, I would appreciate your help. He said, do you want to leave your kayak cart here? And I said, no. You know, I'm going to have to use this and take this with me. So he just made conversation in a way that was distracting enough so it wasn't so obvious that I was struggling. And then I was trying to push myself out of the mud to get on. Yeah. And he started to move towards like he was going to push me out. And I said, I think I've got it. And he goes, you absolutely have it. He said, you don't need my help. You're fine.
Yes.
And it was one of the more glorious moments that I've had in the last 6 months that I did it by myself, in and out of the kayak by myself. The return was interesting because he was still standing there. And I said, so I need to know more about this bait. And he said, undiluted, you know, concentrated, undiluted. So I'm envisioning a garlic Kool-Aid rub.
Oh, I don't
not
even
a marinade.
want to.
But a rub. But he used the word concentrated, and I just remember thinking that's such an interesting word to use to describe non-water Kool-Aid. And then the word came up again. And I really like how you're talking about the domains this way, because I mean, so I had to pull mine up. That's what I was doing. You knew that.
I knew.
Because I was thinking, okay, where am I?
Like, where does your first theme in a domain appear? Yeah. And that's why I don't want to not give credence. So this is a general hypothesis just from just working with people and coaching people and what I've noticed. And I don't think that it means that we don't give credence to the way in which certain themes are able to jump and manifest in each domain, right? Like I talk a lot about how the domains are flexible, they're open, they're they're malleable, right? Like my context falls into a strategic thinking theme, but I use it to build relationships and to influence and to execute all the time. But I think there's something about the fact that, yeah, even that illustration of concentrated Kool-Aid versus watered down, that, that the first theme to appear in your list in each domain, I think is a bit more concentrated, because when push comes to shove, when I'm called upon to influence or to execute, I'm going to call upon my top 5, but I'm also probably going to call upon my first pure form of that domain's manifestation. So I'm going to call upon my achiever, which is 12 for me in executing. I'm going to call upon my self-assurance at 13 as my first influencing theme in conjunction with my other themes. So I don't think it means that you need to necessarily, and what I've been working through the couple people that this has showed up with in a coaching sense, I don't think it means we need to invest and claim that as a dominant theme, but we need to be aware of its presence, of the fact that that's our first theme to solely fall in that domain, because we need to know when we're pulling on that theme in order to function. And that helps us to more proactively aim it in a way for success rather than it getting in the way, right? If I didn't claim and know that self-assurance is my first influencing theme, it will get in the way. I will, I had a really good conversation with somebody I was coaching around self-assurance about one of the descriptors of self-assurance is when you're not fazed by other people's criticisms. And almost the way that I kind of interpreted that and talked about it in my own life is that I almost like double down when people push back. I'm like, if people criticize me and try to like tear apart, it almost means I like double down, which is something really good to be aware of, because if I want to learn and grow, I need to take people's criticism and not just like double down on my own argument, but say, okay, there is credence and validity in the feedback you're giving me, and then I take that and apply it, right? So that's a more positive, mature form of self-assurance versus maybe its raw form, which says, if somebody criticizes me, well, I'm not going to listen to that, and I'm just going to double down on my own belief and perspective. But even though I don't necessarily function in self-assurance all the time, because it's not a dominant theme, I need to be critically aware of that, because it can get in the way of my success if I don't have that awareness and that recognition of how it pops up and shows up in my life a lot.
So I have 2 in my top 5. I have 2 in strategic thinking, and I have 2 in influencing, and then 1 in relationship building. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know when executing comes in. Well, achiever
number 6. Yeah, number 6. So in your dominant, you have representation in all 4 domains. So I think that that's a little bit different, right? Like these are kind of 2 different ways in which we need to go about kind of coaching people. So there's somebody on staff that I'm coaching too that has representation in all 4 domains in their top 5. And so I think the different ways then you go about, and the different ways that I've kind of gone about approaching and coaching these people is that, right, the being really concentrated in your domains. So having a lot of themes in few domains in your top 5 or top 10 means that you are almost in a really particular lane. Like you are kind of from the strengths-based perspective, like you have a really clear trajectory of what you're good at, and consequently what people can rely upon you to contribute to a team, to a group, how you're naturally going to default to leadership. The way that I've kind of been explaining and kind of wrestling with people who are more spread out with their themes is that there's a little more versatility in their team function and their leadership ability. So if you put someone that has representation in all 4 domains on a team, if that team has a high concentration of executors already, that versatile person, probably their executing themes are going to take a back burner, and maybe their influencing themes are going to pop up, or their relationship building. There's a little more of the ability to vacillate back and forth between what themes do I need to show up in order to help this team be really productive. And oftentimes that's counter to the types of themes that are already showing up in that team, or even in a leadership position, right? So if a leader is looking at the people that they manage, and the people they manage are really heavy in relationship building, maybe say, but maybe have a lower concentration of executing, as a leader, that manager might say, well, might default to using their executing themes more in order to help their team get things done, because that's not how their team defaults. So it's a lot of, there's more flexibility in terms of team and group synergy to say what needs to show up in order to help this team or this group or this role as a manager be really successful. And so I think that's where you show up, right? With a little bit of some good representation. Yeah, good representation across a lot of the domains. Now, when you look at your top 10, you have a lot more relationship building themes show up. And then you have, a few more strategic thinking themes. And so you have good representation in your dominant. So you are maybe a little more of a versatile person as a team member. Which
may look like lack of confidence.
Sure. Because you're going to show up in different teams in different ways. And I think that needs to be acknowledged for the gift that you then bring to each of those teams, rather than, I think, probably an assumption that could be made is, gosh, they're just like a different person in different settings. Like, who are they really, right? And I don't think that you are you, Allie. You bring your strengths to the table, but each team is going to ask something different of you. And I think that's your greatest asset, is to be able to shift and change how you show up in a team to say, which of my themes, which of my talents are really needed to help this team become successful. There's a great benefit in that. There's also great benefit in like how, someone with kind of my strengths concentration shows up, but there's less flexibility then. Like, I'm always going to show up with a critical and analytical mind. Like, I'm always going to show up and say, how can we think through this better and prepare for this better? And I'm going to build relationships along the way. I'm not going to help default us to an executing place or an influencing place by the natural distribution of my strengths. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference in maybe how teams are curated by leaders, knowing the different types of domain concentrations. So someone might, if you're on a team, you're maybe going to vacillate and be more flexible in how you show up, but I might more proactively be selected to be on the team because they know exactly how I'm going to show up, right? So there's, I guess, a little bit of a difference depending on...
Which may look like brazen confidence.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I think part of the reason I think this is good is that we're talking about this today is there are so many different ways that all of us are showing up right now. And I think without some of there are barriers, but there are also barriers being lifted.
Yeah.
So I had a great conversation with Sam from the UNL strengths team last night. And we were talking a little bit about, some of the different things that are happening and what we're observing and what we're experiencing. And I feel like there are barriers, yes, but some of the veils are being lifted in a way that are exposing gaps, are exposing problems, are exposing things that maybe we didn't have dialogues about. And the other thing too is that you're really you have this time now to create what your day, week, environment looks like in such a meaningful way. So what are you actually going to do with it? And you can't make an excuse anymore, at least for me. I can't make an excuse anymore for, I have to travel so much, so A, B, C, or D. I kind of got to thinking the other day that, I love so much about my job. I love in traveling to communities.
Yeah.
And I used to think that was about travel. But it's actually about
the human connection. Yeah.
So I realized that I could actually travel for me.
Wow. Mind blown. Allie, oh my gosh. How old are you? How long did it take you to get to this point? Jeez
I was
Louise.
today years old when I figured that out, that I could travel for myself.
You could travel for
But some of these revelations, and that's pretty ridiculous. But some of these revelations I think are coming from a place of learning. So I had mentioned to you that I saw this really great article through Maria Shriver, of course. About, it's an author, Emily Smith, who wrote The Power of Meaning. And she talks about the 4 pillars of meaning and how they help us to emerge, how she thinks they'll help us to emerge from this pandemic. So she talks about belonging, purpose, storytelling, and transcendence. And so where I feel like I'm really becoming more aware, these kind of veils lifted, moments of clarity, getting really aligned with my own mission, vision, values, is in this place of transcendence.
Okay, explain how she defines that, or maybe how she defines each of them.
Yeah. So belonging, being in relationship or communities where you're valued for who you are intrinsically, and where you value others for who they are intrinsically. It's about feeling seen, heard, loved, and cared for. That's belonging. You can experience that through touch. You can experience that through eye contact, a smile. It's really the listening to what someone is saying and hearing them, that sense of belonging, connection. Purpose, as we talk about a lot here, it's the long-term goal that orients your life. It's meaningful to you, and it makes a contribution to the world. So we think about what we refer to in our Strengths Day as Ikigai, that combination of what you love, what you're good at, what your world or community needs, your purpose. It's our why, the reason we wake up in the morning. So purpose is pretty easy to identify. Storytelling. So this pillar is the story you tell about your life. How did you become the person that you are today? I just love this. What experience has shaped you? What did you lose? What did you gain? Storytelling brings clarity to our experience.
It almost reminds me, we talked a little bit about the house exercise recently. That's going to be featured again, right? It's, what were the moments of resilience in your life? What were, who have been the people that have really contributed to who you are? What are the ideas that have shaped you? Yeah.
And I love that this has been showing up a lot for me. And this is what she says in the article. The good news is that we are the authors of our own stories and can change the way we're telling them if they hold us back. We get to edit, we get to interpret the story in new ways while staying true to the facts. Research shows that people who are leading meaningful lives tend to tell stories about their lives defined by redemption, growth, and love. So Anna and I were lucky enough to get to know Jessica, who's one of our presenters from Boys Town. I want to say, I won't get her, I think it's Gibson. I want to make sure I get her last name right. But she did a session on post-traumatic growth. And that was so illuminating for me. And now that phrase is everywhere right now. PTG, post-traumatic growth. But I think really there's so much that we can get caught up in a narrative and letting a narrative define us. So, we've talked a lot about confidence. I am 100% confident in what I need for me now more than ever. But when I show up with others, my intrinsic value is to value what others need. Yeah. So that may show up as lack of confidence because I naturally want to be sure that people are seen and heard as they are. But I'll come home to me and feel confident about who I am now, probably more than ever. And I think that's in storytelling.
And that's how you show up too in your strengths, right? Your strengths are all relationally oriented. Your empathy is very much about how other people feel. So you're showing up in your best self by having an awareness of what other people are going through, which you're right, means that you're more externally dependent on the voices of others than internally dependent, which is good to be aware of. I love that definition of storytelling because that word, when you first read it, as the 4 pillars of meaning, I was like, oh gosh, that I had a very limited view and tunnel vision view of what I thought storytelling was, and automatically it's like, well, I'm not a storyteller, so I don't know how that can create meaning in my life. I don't have high communication, right? But then as soon as you said, like, we craft the narrative about our own lives, we interpret, we edit, like that language that you shared that she wrote in the article, I think is just beautiful. And you're right, we're all the storytellers of our own lives. And I think about the way that, I journal and I share about and reflect on my own experiences. I don't know that I would have ever used the term storytelling to define that, but it's very true.
And I think of how your context shows up in this description of storytelling. So Starman family events are, you share the stories of those events and how it is a very distinct part of your narrative and your story. Yeah. And it lights you up. It's something that you not only are the author of that story, you want to continue that story. You want that story to go on and on and on, way past you. I mean, I would say it's a legacy that you very proudly build and remain true to.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think of all the stories I know from Starman family games.
Yeah.
Which you have to share about that game. Well, I don't know if you should share about it here because I'm afraid you're not going to get it copyrighted soon enough.
Someone's going to steal my idea.
But it is so good. So Transcendence, this is the one I really think that you will love, because when I read about this, I thought of you and the way that you act in service so naturally. Okay, Transcendence. It's the experiences of those moments when we're lifted above the hustle and bustle of daily life and we come into contact with something bigger. Geez, I have goosebumps. My connectedness is like, I love everything about it.
Preach.
And then also my word, every day a word comes to me, and today the word is beauty. And listen to this description. They are experiences of beauty and awe that take us outside our own head. They make us feel smaller and at the same time more connected to the world and people around us. There are lots of ways to experience transcendence, like in nature, through religious or spiritual practices like meditation, music, dancing, worship, so on. These experiences bring us to the present moment. As the poet Anthony Hecht wrote, to give yourself over to a transcendent experience is a sort of blessedness. One escapes from all the anguish of the world into the refuge of the present tense. So I was thinking about this. Transcendence could be called beauty. Transcendence could be called blessedness. There's a great gratitude blog that I follow that talks a lot about blessedness, spiritual connectedness. But transcendence is this moment where we're just in recognition of it's so much bigger than a crappy internet connection.
Yeah.
And I witness you walking through that all the time, Tess. I witness you actually walking in it with others, being the example of it, demonstrating it, because you are always thinking about advocacy. And it's not sometimes it is fist in the air advocacy, but it's in such the way you live your life that it is not, it never comes across preachy or pushy. It's just, this is who I am, and this is what I know about the world. So this is how I will choose to live in blessedness to give to others. Yeah. So these 4 pillars, sometimes I think Maria Shriver is secretly sitting around thinking, what does Allison need to hear? And then she incorporates these beautiful authors. I mean, so guess what book is now, queued up for next. This seems to be a fantastic connection with a lot of what we talk about with Viktor Frankl's work. When we talk about the concept of purpose, what's your why? The book is called The Power of Meaning, and it's Emily Esfahani Smith.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that. It connects. There's a connection with all of these elements. I feel like we've talked about them in separate spaces before. We've talked about the narratives and the life-limiting paradigms we have in our lives. We've talked about purpose and how do we create meaning from that. We've talked about the need for belonging and Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how belonging is there. I feel like both of us having higher connectedness, talk a lot about the idea behind transcendence, though I don't know that we've ever used that term before. And so I think it's so, my connectedness is just kind of getting goosebumps too, that all 4 of these things I feel like are very common themes that we talk about and we lift up, and they're talked about here as the 4 pillars of meaning. So I'll send the article to you. I did post it on our, so did you know we have a secret Pinterest board? And you're part of that. Yeah, well, we have our worth mentioning board. No. This is a Genn and Millie topics, and you're a co-creator. What? Sorry. Like, low input is like, I go on Pinterest once every 6 months, I feel like.
So when I think that there might be something that we should cover, I pin it to this secret board.
Oh
so
my
it's
gosh.
just you and I see it before we go live.
Okay, well.
And I wonder to myself out loud, I'm like, I wonder if she knows how much stuff I've got on here. And then if it's something that we talk about, I put it on the worth mentioning board.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, yeah, I've never seen any of those ahead of time because I didn't know the board existed.
So I will move this article from the secret board to the public worth mentioning board.
I'll maybe take a look at the secret board, you know.
I do think that you'll like it, and I do think it ties really well into the DBT, correct? DBT? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The DBT house that we do as our activity. You've blogged about it before. We've talked about it on Genn and Millie before. Mm-hmm. You know, I would love to look and even revisit our houses.
Yeah.
And what do those houses look like right now? Kind of tying back to storytelling. One of her question prompts is, what's the story you'd like to tell about this time when you look back on it in a few years? It might be fun to craft a house right now.
Yeah.
In a time of pandemic and a time of social distancing and really isolation. I listened to a profound piece from Liz Gilbert, who she is just wowing me. Everything happens for a reason in my world, and I started rereading Big Magic, and then she started putting more stuff out on Instagram. And last night she shared that she'd had someone reach out to her saying, I'm struggling, I'm in true isolation, and it's affecting my creativity. And Liz came back, and it's very thoughtful, and I'm going to try to surmise it in a really horrible, I won't do it any justice. But she basically said, if you're not being creative right now, you're not isolated enough. What is getting in your head? Because she referred to what we let in totally affects us. So I have always felt this way. I'm very intuitive, high empathy, but growing up, I knew I couldn't watch certain shows. You know this about me.
Yeah.
I can't watch anything deeper, heavier than 60 Minutes because that stuff gets in my head.
Yeah.
And then I can't undo it. So she talked about the five senses and that they are servants to us. But we have to control what goes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she said, if you are truly in isolation, what's the other crap you're letting in? Are you watching the news 4 hours a day? Are you on social media too much? Are there other voices that are affecting you too much? So it's kind of a 15-minute little spiel that she goes on, and it's so good. But Liz sets up art traps for herself around her home. She's living in total isolation like you and I. She's alone with her plants. And she sets up art traps so that when she gets in her head too much, if she goes around the corner, there's a table that has watercolors. And she goes around she's cleared off her dining table. She said, because I guess I can eat on my lap like the rest of you are doing. I need a dining table.
All the people, all of my plants, you know.
Right. At her dining room table, she now has, art supplies. She sets up art traps. And because she can get in her head based on what she allows her senses to experience.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at your DBT house right now and you recrafted it, I mean, I think we could even do completely different prompts in a pandemic isolation DBT house.
Yeah.
Like, where is your beauty? What does beauty look like to you right now? Where do you see it show up? Is it in the sunlight that comes in your window? Is it in the plants that are growing? Is it in the smell of garlic when you're making dinner in the kitchen? What are those things that kind of lift up beauty to you? Who are your supports? And have they shifted during this time of distance?
Yeah.
Because I think my supports have really revealed themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who care about me are checking in on me in creative ways. Some through, a virtual happy hour, some through, can you go for a walk?
Yeah.
Some through a text that just says, I'm thinking about you. How are you?
Yeah.
Surprising. ways.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's,
what does your sidewalk look like?
Yeah.
As where are your moments to get out in nature? So I think we could do so much with that.
Yeah.
I would call that an art trap.
Yeah, I think that would be good for us to just get together, create some different prompts, and then even come back together and talk about what our quarantine houses look like for next episode. I think that it would be really neat. And one of the questions I was going to ask, which I think you kind of answered by default, is what does the article, what does this author give in terms of how do we reflect and understand these 4 pillars? But she has some questions, it sounds like, in the article.
Mm-hmm. She does.
Okay.
She has some questions. Kind of thinking about the storytelling piece. What's the story you'd like to tell about this time? What's the story you're telling yourself now about this time?
Yeah.
Is this everything's awful?
Yeah.
Or is it daily I find beauty?
Yeah.
Kind of the transcendence piece is, what do we do daily that helps think of like ways that we can be a portal to transcendence. So leaving your phone at home and going for a walk, turning the computer off would be one for me.
Just to give it a rest, much less you a rest.
And she gives a shout out to post-traumatic growth.
Cool. Wow.
That this is a phenomenon after a crisis that most people will have a deeper sense of spiritual life, newfound appreciation, a renewal for purpose.
Yeah. Wow.
So
that's good.
I think, Tess, that sometimes articles find me. More than my input finds articles. Sometimes articles find me.
Yeah.
And they so align with the messages that I think I need to hear. Mm-hmm. And then when you and I chat here, in what is just Tess and Allison having a conversation around strengths, around domains, around purpose, around meaning that seem to transcend to others.
Yeah.
And other people are able to have conversations with people they live with, people they connect with via FaceTime or Zoom or text or email or phone conversations right now in a deeper, more meaningful way. And for me, that's always going to be the best use of my talent.
Yeah.
And my time and my energy.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Yeah. I think that'll be a good thing for all of us to work on. I think maybe something that we can ask of listeners is to kind of read that article and reflect upon those 4 pillars and ask what each of those 4 pillars mean to them and how are they showing up and manifesting in their lives uniquely at this moment. Yeah.
So I do want to make sure that we chat a little bit about, we are going to do the Genn and Millie.
Our listener Zoom is what we've affectionately called it. Show up with your own beverage of choice because we're through a screen, so we're not going to moderate that. But we're, for the purposes of the record, it's called the listener Zoom call. We have scheduled that for Thursday, May 7th of 2020 at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. So in the follow-up to this episode, the email that goes out as well as on our Instagram, I will make sure that I include the Zoom link and information. And Allie will send it out in the email as well so that people could get access to it. We also may be reaching out individually to make sure people come. So maybe people that we want to foster connections with each other. I am so excited for people to just like get together and meet each other, even though it will be virtually. I hope that one day when we get the chance to all be together again, if it's, whenever it will be, if there would be a point where we could do an in-person listener hangout, that would just make my heart so happy. But for right now, we'll be able to do it virtually, which I think will be great nonetheless. And so if you are able to join us, we'd love to have you again Thursday, May 7th, 2020 at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time via Zoom. We're going to have some kind of questions, some prompts, maybe some discussion, kind of like as if we were doing an episode live, but having real-time feedback for the questions. So if you are a person that needs a little bit or likes a little bit more time to process, you might not necessarily get that, but maybe think ahead of time. I'm sure it'll be along the lines of some of the things we're talking about today in preparation, maybe these 4 pillars, along with some of the other themes we have been talking about. I want to give a shout out to, we had a lot of responses on our last episode about hope, and I feel so incredibly blessed. When we talk about blessedness, let's just talk about how incredible the community of listeners we have is, to be able to give really thoughtful reflections on the concept of hope, what it means in their lives, how hope is showing up, how they're living in hope in this season. And it's given me more hope to hear the stories of hope. And I'm going to figure out how many times that I can say that in one moment, the word hope. But it's reinvigorated, this word for me, and especially being my word of the year, and just to have such thoughtful and intentional reflections on what that means. And I think it just is a testament to the depth of that concept. One of the ones that I want to shout out is JC. From Rapid City. She responded to us and talked about how, like, the word love, and from a faith perspective, if you are kind of in maybe a Christian setting or a church, or the Greek term for love is actually 4 different words. There's like a friendship love, there's a like physical intimacy love, there's the agape unconditional love, there's multiple words for love. And she made the case and said, I think there should be multiple words for hope based on the way that hope shows up differently for people. And I just loved that idea, and I thought it was such a good testament to, like, the word love. Hope has come to such extremes. People use it so flippantly, and people use it with such depth, that there is a little bit of a scale of how we use hope and how we define it. So that was just one of the ones that has really stuck with me and made me think a lot over the last few weeks or so as we've been wrestling with this conversation.
And my communication is just in the tank because I haven't been able to respond. I also haven't sent an email out for Genn and Millie, I think, for the last 2 episodes, maybe. I just feel so behind on emails, and just in previewing those, they're amazing responses. But also, I just thought it was so honoring of your word of the year to hear so many different perspectives on how valuable that word is.
Yeah.
That it's a word that carries such important, multiple meanings, but such important meaning. Yeah. It is also the word for Facebook Live on Friday. And Yay! I'm a little, sometimes, well, not sometimes, I always get worried about doing those justice because I have such a short amount of time, and that doesn't work for me. I can't craft a story urgently. So I think what I'm going to do, Shane has this way of, and I know this happens for a lot of my friends who are close to him. Shane has this way of showing up when I need to hear his message. And for some of my friends, that's a cardinal. It was for me when I was running in Lawrence, a couple of years ago now, I think, and had no idea where I was in the neighborhood, and there were 2 cardinals, 3 cardinals, multiple cardinals in front of me as I was running, and turns out it was his house. The word, the messages, the picture, Tess, when you posted that picture of Shane, I mean, it elicited some great memories for a lot of people. Yeah. And just the red balloon. Yeah. But I have his book next to me almost all the time now because I reference it when we do online renewals. Yeah. I talk about, I end with the quote, if you want to change a kid's life for the better, you have to get them excited about the future. That's a hard thing to do right now. Yeah. And I talk about the impact of hope and engagement. But I think what I'm going to do is read a little bit of some of his writing. Good. And then talk in a storytelling, belonging purpose sort of way, talk about the ways that word influences our choices. Yeah. So it's obviously a bridge between our 2 words. But what we're hopeful about helps us determine what our priorities are.
Absolutely.
And it's my hope that through teammates, that people remember that they've created a message of hope for their mentee long before this happened.
Yep. I love that. It calls me back to when we were guessing each other's words. Do you remember that episode? That was the episode that I broke down because I was like, how is this possible? How do you know me this well, Allie? Like, this is my pillar of belonging, is the fact that you can guess my word, having given no inclination at all as to what it was. But you said something to the effect of, it wouldn't be something as simple as like hope, you know? And I think I was a little reticent to pick that word myself, because it is so simple, yet there is so much depth to it. And I'm getting choked up just thinking about the power that it has to transform a person's life, that it truly does. And I think Sarah Skaggs wrote so beautifully about it in her response to us this past week, that it changes who you are when you live in hope, and it changes who you are when you live in hopelessness. But it is truly a choice to live out and live in hope. And the fact that something so simple as our mindset, or the idea and energy that we have about the future, can change what today looks like, can change who we are as a person. You know, we all know hopeful people. It's much easier to be around hopeful people than hopeless people. Right. You know, we all kind of gravitate towards people who are a little more hopeful. And so it's just such a timely message right now, but a lifelong message that I feel like is showing up more and more in different places, and truly a place where I feel like I am living out a pillar of transcendence right now, because hope is so much greater than me and the individual hope that I have. It's about sharing about what hope is, what it means, how it can transform people's lives, in the hope that people start to define it and to realize and then actualize it in their everyday life. And then how that has a ripple effect, just like the effect of mentoring does. Like, there is a ripple effect to hope. When someone is hopeful, it breeds hope in other people.
And so on the inside of my book, what Shane wrote to me: Allie, thanks for spreading hope through strengths. You make Nebraska and me better. And he was always talking about ripples. And there are words that get just, like, I don't like the word bucket. I just don't like it, don't like how it sounds. But yet we use it all the time. You know, there's bucket filling experiences, and how full is your bucket? And, you know, be a bucket, be a drop in someone's bucket. There are words that just, sometimes I've learned to adapt them because I don't like the way they sound. Yeah. But I've learned to adapt them in my heart so that they have a different meaning. And the word ripples, I had such a hard time initially coming around to that. You know, I was like, okay. And then I started seeing them. Yeah. And I see them all the time in Shane's work, and how lucky I was to just be sitting across the table from him when we started thinking about doing this organizationally. Yeah. That I had no idea what that would look like. I'd never seen this person in my life. I had no idea what I was doing there. I had no idea what strengths was even about. And I knew about Gallup because I didn't get a job there when I graduated from college. You know, that was my reference to Gallup. But the impact, the ripples are they're so wide, and they're so widespreading, and that message of hope, it illuminates. And those ripples look different for every single human. Yeah. But they come down to, what are you willing, what transcendence are you willing to really experience in your own life, to say, I'm either going to create a ripple that is hopeful, or it could be damaging. Yeah. So that's the impact we all have. I mean, we've talked about this in very simple ways here. You know, do you smile at the checker? You know, do you have a conversation with them when you're leaving the grocery store? Yeah. Do you think about what your next door neighbor needs? Do you think about who would benefit from a positive moment from you? Yeah. Those are small ripples, but they lead to big big impact. So
I love that.
I am beyond
it.
grateful that that's my word for Friday, but I'm a little nervous about doing a justice test. Not just for Shane, for you, for the dialogue that we've had, for the great ways that people have described it. And every single session that I do, when I talk about, the impact of strengths, I'll say to people, what does hope mean to you? And it's profound.
Yeah. And it is as simple as that. Like, you don't need to, it doesn't all ride on your shoulders, Allie, to define this perfectly for us and to explain it well, because all of us know this concept. So highlighting it and giving it weight, giving it meaning, is enough, right? Like we had lots of dialogue about what it meant to us on the last episode, but our simple question was, what does it mean to you individually as a listener? Not redefine and summarize what we think about hope, right? What does it mean to you? And that's really as simple as it needs to be. That's, allowing people to make their own definitions, and reflect upon what that concept means in their own life and how it manifests. And so it doesn't need to be anything huge. And that's what I love about it. And I think of all of my words since I started doing Words of the Year, I think I've been most blown away by this word, by hope. And it's so simple, yet it's so profound. And there is so much beauty in that. So, okay. Well, I'm excited to see people's reflections on the 4 pillars of meaning, what they think about that after they read the article. I'm excited to see people's faces on our listener Zoom call. And then I wanted to give another small business shout out. Before we kind of concluded this episode. Yesterday was the release date of Perfectly Golden, which is the cookbook of the head baker and creator of Goldenrod Pastries.
Oh, yes!
Yes. Goldenrod Pastries is a pastry shop. They now have 2 locations in Lincoln. And every time I go to Lincoln, I go out of my way to ensure that I go there. Her concept is adaptable baking. And so she makes, or inclusive baking. So she makes recipes. They're almost all gluten-free, all dairy-free, and most of them are vegan, or you're able to make adjustments in order to make all of these absolutely delicious pastries available to all people, regardless of allergies or dietary restrictions. And so she came out with her first cookbook, and it has like all of the main things you can go into the store and buy. So I don't have to make special trips to Lincoln to get great bakery or great sweets to eat. And so I'm really excited. My beauty is going to be making something out of the cookbook this weekend. But I wanted to give a shout out to this baker, Angela. Follow Goldenrod Pastries on social media. Maybe look into her book, especially if you are or you know someone with dietary restrictions. Everything is absolutely delicious. You would not know that there were any cuts that needed to be made or changes that needed to be made in terms of what you're eating. And so, but it's been a long time coming. I pre-ordered the cookbook a while ago, and it came out yesterday. And so I am so excited to dig into it. It's also if you were at conference last year, Allie and I kind of pulled together a staff recommendations sheet of what are some things to do or places to go or places to eat or shop or visit in Lincoln. And this was my number 1 recommendation. If you go anywhere, go to Goldenrod Pastries. It's a woman-empowered bakery, Great Plains Coalition. It's named after the flower of the state of Nebraska, the goldenrod, which I learned post going there for the first time. I was like, that's kind of interesting. I don't know what a goldenrod is, and I'm not native to Nebraska, so I didn't know what the state flower of Nebraska was. And so want to give a major shout out. I know there has been a lot of love, a lot of time, and a lot of investment that she has done to create that bakery, to make it into what it is, and to publish this book. She's shared quite a bit on social media about the struggles, originally wanting to open the bakery in Omaha and plans falling through. And so the resiliency that she has in order to create this place, and she does a lot of advocacy too, which I just love, a strong female entrepreneur who does a lot of social justice advocacy as well. So I want to give a shout out to her. Again, the book is Perfectly Golden, and you can I bought it on Amazon. You can find it if you guys are interested in that. I
just linked Goldenrod Pastries to our worth mentioning board on Pinterest. I am familiar with them as well. I think that is fantastic, Tess, that you have that. I can't wait to see what you create.
Oh, I'm so
excited.
And
that is a great small business shout out.
Yeah.
I want to give one. I think we've done this for Block 16 before, but I want to do it again because they are being very considerate of their staff and are choosing not to reopen their dining options and continue doing what they're doing with takeout. And I just really respect that and appreciate that because they're being considerate of the humans who work there, but also the humans who would be in the space. So I'm kind of loving seeing some of these things that are coming from small business owners who are taking a stand of integrity.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think supporting that is really key.
Yep. I love it. It's we're getting to know who people really are, like we've talked about before, with all of when decisions have to be made, right? We're getting to see, not that people who've made the choice to reopen, but there have been quite a few businesses. Night Owl is another one. A lot of the Blackstone businesses right in my neighborhood have chosen not to reopen, when the state is allowing places to reopen out of safety. So yeah, it's exciting. Awesome. Okay, well, as we mentioned, do some reflection on what these 4 pillars of meaning mean to you. Belonging, purpose, storytelling, and transcendence. We'll link the article for you guys to read and reflect on. We're excited about that. Allie and I are going to get together and maybe think about some different questions and prompts to allow people to create their isolation DBT house, their quarantine 2020 house. And I think that'll be a really great point of reflection. And then we hope to see you guys on May 7th next week at 4 p.m. for our listener Zoom. And anything else that I missed, Allie?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. Awesome. And then if you guys have any reflections on my hypotheses around domains and strengths, let me know. I think it's an intriguing conversation that I've really been percolating on for a while. So I'd be excited if anyone wants to have further dialogue about domains. And
if there's anybody who believes that bait is legit, I would love to hear about it.
Yes.
Chicken breast, garlic, Kool-Aid. Let's not even.
We already said what it was. I don't need to put that image in my mind and in my salivary glands. All right.
Not good for your senses.
Not good for my senses. Alrighty, well, thank you everybody for tuning in to episode 68 of Genn and Millie. If you enjoyed today's conversation, consider sharing this episode with a friend. I'm trying to do this from memory too. To interact with us on social media or to share your responses that we post in this episode, the best way to reach us is Instagram. That's at Genn and Millie. That's at GENNANDMILLIE. As always, we want to remind you all that the views and the opinions expressed in this podcast are exclusively that of Allison Horn and Tess Starman and may not reflect the views of Teammates Mentoring Program at large. It has been a wonderful conversation today, and so I hope that you guys tune in to our listener Zoom or tune in next time to our next episode as we kind of reflect on an isolation DBT house. A little bit of future casting for that. Until next time.